Good afternoon. We are here once again at the gravesite of Reverend Edwin Thompson. He was the Universalist Society pastor in South Dedham in the 1840s and a fierce abolitionist. A contemporary and colleague of Frederick Douglass, Thompson spoke alongside Douglass at many anti-slavery gatherings. This year is also the 160th anniversary of the end of the Civil War. While Old Parish Cemetery is the final resting place of 16 Civil War veterans, there are 4 memorials honoring soldiers who died during the conflict. Willard Rhodes, the son of Deacon Lewis Rhodes and his wife Harriet, joined Company B, 1st Michigan Cavalry in 1861. This regiment was part of the famed Michigan Brigade, referred to as the Wolverines. Rhodes was promoted to the rank of Quartermaster Sergeant on June 20th, 1863. He was killed in action at Centerville, Virginia on November 6th, 1863. He was 25. John Henry Hale was born in Bernardston, Massachusetts. He married Julia Bird Park, the daughter of Reverend Harrison Park, who had served the South Church of Dedham, and his wife Elizabeth. Hale enlisted in Company I of the 9th Massachusetts Regiment on May 5, 1864, under the command of Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant. The company engaged in the Battle of the Wilderness. Private John Hale lost his life in that battle. He was 27. Hale's brother-in-law, Henry Martin Park, the son of Reverend Harrison and Elizabeth Park, enlisted in the 40th Massachusetts Volunteers. After serving in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and South Carolina, the regiment returned to Virginia. There, on May 20th, 1864, Henry Park was wounded 3 times in battle, taken to the hospital at Fortress Monroe, and died there on June 18, 1864. He was 22. Charles Phipps, the eldest child in his family, grew up in South Dedham and was a teamster when he enlisted in the 24th Massachusetts Regiment in September of 1861. From August 14th through the 16th, 1864, the regiment fought in the Battle of Deep Bottom, Virginia. Among the soldiers killed in action on August 16, 1864, was Charles Phipps. He was 28. The bodies of Willard Rhodes, Henry Park, and Charles Phipps were returned to South Dedham and are interred in the cemetery. John Henry Hale was likely buried on the battlefield, but is memorialized on the Park family gravestone. Flowers have been placed at these graves and that of Reverend Edwin Thompson. We pay particular tribute to them today. And now we'll begin our reading.
Okay. Mr. President, friends and fellow citizens, the task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. The papers and placards say that I'm to deliver a 4th of July oration. This certainly sounds large and out of the common way, for it is true that I have often had the privilege to speak in this beautiful hall and to address many who now honor me with their presence. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former to be by no means slight. That I am here today is to me a matter of astonishment as well as of gratitude.
This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This, to you, is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. You are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon.
Step right up there. Perfect.
Fellow citizens, the simple story is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You are under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government, England as the fatherland, although a considerable distance from your home, impose, in the exercise of its parental prerogatives, upon its children such restraints, burdens, and limitations, as in its mature judgment it deemed wise, right, and proper.
About 3 inches, okay? Perfect.
But your fathers, who had not adopted the idea of the infallibility of government and the absolute character of its acts, presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. I scarcely need say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers. Feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn.
Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regard it. The timid and prudent of that day were, of course, shocked and alarmed by it. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it.
On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution, and as we seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equal to this, it may refresh your minds and help my story if I read it. Resolved, that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, dissolved.
Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you therefore may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny.
Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes. and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. They loved their country better than their own private interests, and all will concede that is a rare virtue that ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country.
They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times.
How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. They're stretched away in strength into the distant future, fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them. Your fathers, the fathers of this republic, laid the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary.
Thank you.
Go about 3 inches. Take a step forward.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it.
My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and his cause is the ever-living now. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. Now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labors of your fathers unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us?
Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful.
But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? Fellow citizens, above your national and tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them.
My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day from the slave's point of view. Standing here, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future.
Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not use the most severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice or is not at heart a slaveholder shall not confess to be right and just.
I fancy I hear someone of my audience say, "It is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public mind." Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is pain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue?
Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a black man, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being?
Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read or write. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts in the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle's on your hills, when the fish of the sea, and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from the brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man.
For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. It is not astonishing that, while we are plowing, planting and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and, above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave. We are called upon to prove that we are men.
Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is it to be settled by the rules and logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans to show that men have a natural right to freedom? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him.
What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, and to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and strengths than such arguments would imply.
What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought. That which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? I cannot. The time for such argument is past.
At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument, is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, it is fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days of the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are, to him, mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages.
There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and despotisms of the old world, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival.
Take the American slave trade, which is especially prosperous just now, and carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this confederacy. In several states, this trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called the internal slave trade, in order to divert it from the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated. That trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy, as an execrable traffic. To arrest it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhuman traffic, opposed alike to the laws of God and of man. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable.
Behold the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade, sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover? I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all our southern states. They perambulate the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers armed with a pistol, whip, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men and women and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill.
Mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along, and the inhuman wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries on his affrighted captives. There see an old man with locks thinned and gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon the young mother, whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her briny tears falling on the brow of the babe in her arms. See, too, that girl of 13, weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle. The fetters clank and the chain rattles simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child and her chains. That gash on her shoulder tells her to move on.
Follow the drove to New Orleans. Attend the auction. See men examined like horses. See the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever, and never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from the scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where under the sun can you witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking? Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the United States.
Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highway of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacious, the buyers and sellers of men.
By an act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in its most horrible and revolting form. Mason and Dixon's line has been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States. The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner and American Christianity. Where these go, may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He is a bird for the sportsman's gun. By that most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad Republican domain is hunting ground for men.
Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state enforce as a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have, within the past 2 years, been hunted down and without a moment's warning, hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children dependent on them for bread, but of this no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage and to all rights in this republic, the rights of God included.
For black men, there are neither law nor justice, humanity nor religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery, and 5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any 2 villains is sufficient, under this hell-black enactment, to send the most pious and exemplary black man into the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witnesses for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor. Let this damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic, Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe, and are bound in deciding the case of a man's liberty to hear only his accusers. In glaring violation of justice, in shameless disregard of the forms of administering law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislation.
Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 million of your countrymen. You hurled your anathemas at the crowned-headed tyrants of Russia and Austria, and pride yourselves on your democratic institutions, while you yourselves consent to be the mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina. You invite to your shores the fugitives of oppression from abroad. Honor them with banquets. Greet them with ovations. Cheer them. Toast them. Salute them. Protect them. And pour out your money to them like water. But fugitives from your own land, you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill.
You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system which, in its very essence, casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off a threepenny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hard-earned farthing from the grasp of the black laborers of your country. You profess to believe that of one blood God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of all the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another. Yet you notoriously hate and glory in your hatred all men whose skins are not colored like your own.
You declare before the world and are understood by the world to declare that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and yet you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose. A 7th part of the inhabitants of your country.
Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge farther on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing, and a word by to a mocking earth. Be warned, a horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from you the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 millions crush and destroy it forever.
Allow me to say, in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I, therefore, leave off where I began, with hope. While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old path of its fathers without interference.
The time was when such could be done. But a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying, okay, audience, all God's speed the day when human blood shall cease to flow. In every clime be understood the claims of human brotherhood. In each return for evil, good, now blow for blow. The day will come all feuds to end and change into a faithful friend and foe. Thank you. Hi, neighbors. Happy Independence Day. I am happy to be here with you. I hail from next door, kind of. Sharon. I am Kiana Pierre-Louis. I am the chair of the Select Board in Sharon. Don't judge me. And I was here with you all last year, if some of you remember me. And I gave they kind of say the expert speak, but no expert here. So I'm going to give some words, but a little bit different, a little spin on what I feel is going on right now. I am a professor at Northeastern, a dean at Northeastern. I have two little ones, and my daughter is actually currently in the hospital. So I'm going to leave right from here and go back, but this is a good break to see you all here and do this with you. So give me a second. Today, as we celebrate this nation's birth, I want to reflect on one of the most powerful truth tellers, Frederick Douglass, and the urgent relevance of his words in our time. Born into slavery in Maryland, Douglass escaped bondage in 1838 and eventually settled in New Bedford, Massachusetts. In 1845, he published his autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, a harrowing, courageous account that made his status as an escaped slave publicly known and forced him to flee to England for safety. There, with the help of supporters, his freedom was purchased, but Douglass had already become something larger than his personal story. He had become a voice of freedom, truth, and justice. Douglass emerged as a leading abolitionist voice in Massachusetts and New York. A gifted orator and incisive thinker, he shattered the racist myth of his day, especially the belief that Black people were incapable of intellectual or civic participation. He believed deeply in the equality of all people, regardless of race, gender, or origin, and valued dialogue even with those who disagreed. When criticized for engaging slaveholders in debate, he famously said, "I would unite with anybody to do right and nobody to do wrong." The commitment was never more clear than in his speech of July 5th, 1852, delivered in Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York, known, as we heard today, What to the Slave is the 4th of July. Douglass was invited to speak as part of Independence Day celebration, but he chose to speak not on the 4th, but the day after. He stood before a mostly white audience and held up a mirror to the nation. The very idea of celebrating liberty while millions remained in chains was not only offensive, it was a mockery of justice. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you, Douglass declared, has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. He didn't mince words. He called out the hypocrisy of a country that recited all men are created equal, while upholding slavery, brutality, and white supremacy. He reminded his audience that Black Americans had not been included in the promises of the Declaration of Independence. And he was right. Douglass spoke at a time of profound tension in the country. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1852 had recently passed, requiring even free states, to add in the capture and return of escaped enslaved people. It empowered federal officials to override local protections and punish anyone who resisted. Courts ruled in favor of slave catchers, and the federal government created new ways to uphold slavery under the pretense of law and order. It was under these grim circumstances that Douglass reminded the nation, your celebrations ring hollow while injustice reigns. He was not simply critiquing America. He was calling it to its highest ideals. Douglass believed in the potential of this country, but insisted that belief alone was not enough. The ideals of liberty, justice, and equality had to be made real, and that work, and still is, our responsibility. More than 170 years later, we are still confronted by the same tensions, a nation that claims freedom while denying full dignity and opportunity for so many. Systems of oppression have evolved, but they have not disappeared. They exist in voter suppression laws, mass incarceration, economic inequality, attacks on public education, immigration policies, and even efforts to silence history. And yet, just as those systems persist, so does the tradition of resistance. We are the heirs of Frederick Douglass, not just in blood or lineage, but in spirit. We belong to a long line of people who challenged injustice, told hard truth, and refused to let America forget its obligations. We know, as Douglass did, that patriotism is not about blind celebration, it is about accountability. Let us be clear. Celebration without justice is hollow, and justice without action is a myth. So on this Independence Day, I ask, what does freedom mean if it is not for everyone? What is the liberty worth if it excludes some by race, status, income, ability, or identity? And what is our role, your role, in ensuring that this nation truly becomes what it claims to be? In the words of Angela Davis, freedom is a constant struggle. That struggle continues, and we must show up for it, not just in our voting booths, but in our organizations, our courtrooms, our boardrooms, and our streets. We must organize, teach, resist, protect, and heal. Douglass believed change was possible, and so must we. Let today be more than a commemoration. Let it be a challenge to live up to our ideals, a challenge to speak the hard truth, a challenge to finish the work Douglass and so many others began. Because the 4th of July doesn't belong to just one group of people. It belongs to all of us. So it belongs to none of us. Thank you.